video, we're going to be talking about something called dual fulfillment, which you may not have heard of before. And we'll be talking about dual fulfillment and using the example of Isaiah's virgin birth. And we understand more about that was something about the Messiah that was written by Isaiah long ago. And this is going to be a little bit of a technical topic, but there's a lot of value in this, so don't quit early on it. So Isaiah speaks of a virgin in Isaiah 7:14. And it says, "Behold, a virgin will be with child and bear a son, and she will call his name Emmanuel." So this verse has actually been Christianized, that is converted into a Christian context for Christians to understand, so that they don't have to try and figure out that this prophecy is actually about Jesus. And what they did to do that was the Hebrew word that's used by Isaiah is not the word for virgin. There's a different Hebrew word that you wanted to say, if you wanted to say that a woman was a virgin, you would use that Hebrew word instead. But the word that is used here does not necessarily mean virgin. And that's key to what's really going on with this dual fulfillment, as we'll see later on. So the word that is used in Isaiah 7:14, the Hebrew word there, is Alma, and that is better translated as a young woman or a girl or an unmarried maiden. And so the focus of the word Alma is really on youth and not on virginity at all. But you do kind of expect virginity for a youthful girl like that. And so I have a quote here, don't remember where it came from, but it says, "The spiritual and moral ethos in Hebrew culture assumed that young unmarried girls had no sexual experience. It was assumed that an Alma was a virgin." So that was just part of it. Alma didn't mean it was a virgin, but you would expect an Alma to be a virgin. That's just how it went along. So here's where dual prophetic fulfillment starts to come in. So we usually think of a good prophecy as being one that talks about a single event at a moment in time, and that's how we know it's a good prophecy, because that one thing that happened there, that really tells us, yes, God knew the future, and he told us what was going to happen, and that single event is the proof that it was a good prophecy. But that's the way humans think. That's not the way God thinks. So we want prophecies to be as precise as possible, to tell us about an exact event that happens at an exact time, and that way we can know it's exactly God's work and God's prophetic fulfillment. But generally, God is not like that. God will not be that precise. And I actually have a video on this called "Why Are These Things Never Clear?" And I'll put a link here for you to look at that one. And it talks about that issue of why God chooses not to be precise and why it's necessary, in fact, for him not to be precise. So different topic, but you can look at that. So what God does instead is he uses dual or triple fulfillments, which means that a single prophecy is fulfilled 2 or 3 times, and not just at one time. And to us, that seems to make prophecy weaker. The way we think of prophecy is it should be a single event, single time, and all nice and exact. But that's not the way God sees things. And remember, I had trouble with this when I was doing my first prophecy class and learning prophecy as a younger man, much younger man. That made me think the same thing. Well, isn't the prophecy weaker if it has multiple fulfillments? If it had like 10 or 12 fulfillments, wouldn't that be a really weak prophecy instead? But no, that's not the way it is. God is actually doing something that's better. He's saying, I know that this is going to happen here, and it's very similar to something that's going to happen later on here in time. And so I can do in a single prophecy cover both of those things. And so we should understand that. So God uses this dual or even sometimes triple prophetic fulfillments very frequently in the Bible, but very few people recognize them. So when it's done, a prophecy is written by God so that it applies to 2 or more periods in time, so 2 or more events in time. So at one time it refers to this, and at another time it refers to this. So when verses are written for a dual fulfillment, they often have an odd look to them. And this verse from Isaiah is very typical of that. What you'll see is if for a person who reads the original language, you'll see, boy, this is written strangely. Who would write this? And this is because the first fulfillment will not be a virgin birth. Okay, but the second fulfillment is going to be a virgin birth, although people aren't going to figure that out right away. And so, because it's going to refer to these 2 different births, it can't use the word virgin. It has to use a different word. And so, it uses the Hebrew word almond. So the verse must be written so it can be true of both births. And that's why the Hebrew word for virgin is not used. Instead, it uses this word alma that I mentioned before, which refers to a young woman who should be a virgin. You would expect her to be a virgin because she's young, and unmarried is kind of part of that. And so when she gives birth, that's an unusual thing. And so the verse looks odd because it talks about this Alma giving birth, and in this context of Ahaz, we'll see more about that later on. So, but young women who should be virgins give birth altogether too often. That happens. And why would you mention that? There's lots of reasons that a young woman that you would expect to be a virgin would give birth, and those are things like adultery or rape or incest. Those can all be a reason why you would why those happen. They shouldn't happen, but they do happen. And because they do happen, why bother mentioning it here? What's special about this? And that's part of what makes that verse strange in the original language is why mention it? Why is it worthy of mentioning that this person that you would expect to be a virgin has given birth? And because of that, Jewish scholars have recognized the oddness of this passage, and they've even wondered if it is about the Messiah. So, in context, we'll go through what Isaiah says and the whole context of it, which is really quite glorious and a wonderful thing. So, Isaiah 7 3 through 7 is what we're looking at. We're going to be looking at. Then the Lord said to Isaiah, Go out now to meet Ahaz, and say to him, Take care and be calm, have no fear, and do not be faint-hearted because of these two stubs of smoldering firebrands. He's talking about two men that are threatening to attack Jerusalem. And thus says the Lord God, It shall not stand, nor shall it come to pass. So Ahaz is the king of Judah. He's gotten word that there are enemy nations led by these two guys that this prophecy refers to as smoking firebrands, which is not a fire, they're just kind of a smoldering, not doing really anything. And he's heard that these two have banded together with a plan to attack Jerusalem. And because of that, everyone in Jerusalem is afraid of what's going to happen. And God sends Isaiah to comfort Ahaz with this prophecy. And this prophecy is going to tell him that nothing is going to come of these efforts of these nations. Don't be worried about them. What it says is, it shall not stand, nor shall it come to pass. So all the plans these two smoking firebrands have, those are not going to succeed. They're not going to come to anything. Okay, continuing on. Then the Lord spoke again to Ahaz, saying, Ask a sign for yourself from the Lord your God. Make it deep as Sheol or high as heaven. But Ahaz said, I will not ask, nor will I test the Lord. Then he said, Listen now, O house of David, is it too slight a thing that for you to try the patience of men, that you will try the patience of my God as well? Therefore the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, a virgin will be with child, and bear a son, and she will call his name Emmanuel. He will eat curds and honey at the time he knows enough to refuse evil and choose good. For before the boy will know enough to refuse evil and choose good, the land whose two kings you dread will be forsaken. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there. We'll unpack it in a moment. But it uses the word virgin in this translation. Other translations don't even actually use that word. They use something that's closer to the word alma. They will use young woman or something like that. But this translation uses the word virgin there. So what's happening is God is instructing Ahaz to name a sign that God can use to show Ahaz that these kings are not going to be a problem. So he's going to back up this promise by showing Ahaz a sign. But Ahaz remembers back to when the Israelites were in the wilderness and they were constantly testing God by requiring God to do things. And he says, I don't want to get into that. I don't want to be testing God. But what he's missed here is that has been instructed to ask for a sign. So in fact, he's failing to follow God and thinking for himself, and so he doesn't want to be doing that because he thinks it would be wrong. But God has said do that. So anyway, he refuses to ask God for a sign, and because of that, he's just relying on his own understanding and forgetting to obey God. Therefore, God decides what the sign will be, and the prophet who's come to give him the prophecy, Isaiah, chides him for saying that he's not going to ask for a sign when he was told to ask for a sign. Therefore, God decides what the sign will be, and the sign will be that a young woman will give birth. And the sign is this dual fulfillment prophecy we've been talking about. And so this dual fulfillment prophecy is going to have two parts, two fulfillments to it. In the distant future, a virgin will give birth to the Messiah. That's the part that we remember it for mostly, and that's why that verse is translated virgin in this particular revision of the Bible. But in Ahaz's time, this is also going to mean something to him. It's going to be a sign to him. It's going to be a sign of a young unmarried girl will give birth to a son. And not just that, he'll be a boy and he will be called Emmanuel. So Ahaz gets all of these things to look for in this sign. And so he knows when he sees a young woman who you would expect to not have any sexual experience giving birth to a son, and the son is a boy, and the boy, she gives the name Emmanuel, then this is your sign, God is saying. And there's things that follow on from that. So, and what God says is before the son that she has knows right from wrong, those kings will be gone. They won't be in even anything on the landscape at all. And right now, Ahaz is afraid of what these two kings are up to. So the backstory here is the fulfillment in Ahaz's time was for Ahaz, and it's not recorded anywhere in the Bible, certainly that I know of. I'm pretty sure it's not there at all. Um, and so no one knows who this young woman was or who this child was or what happened to them, anything like that. None of that we know about. Well, and that's not really important here. It was assigned to Ahaz in his time, and so that he would have to know these things when they happened. He would recognize this young woman. Maybe it was a daughter of his, maybe it was a relative of his, something like that, someone he would know and recognize. And he has these signs to look for. This young woman who shouldn't be pregnant is pregnant, and she gives birth to a boy and calls him Emmanuel. And so he has all these things to look for. And when he looks for and sees these things, he will say, "Oh, okay, that's what the prophecy was about." And so that starts the clock. And so, as we talked about before, there are other ways for a young unmarried woman to give birth than virgin birth. And so we have no reason to believe that this young woman that Ahaz will recognize is going to actually give a birth virginally. And rape, as I said before, incest and immorality are all on the list of possible causes why a woman who shouldn't be pregnant is pregnant. And we don't know what happened here, as I said before. Nothing in the Bible records this. Nothing in history that I know of either records exactly what happened here. And so that part of the prophecy was really fulfilled in Ahaz's time for the benefit of Ahaz, as a sign to Ahaz. And so the message for Ahaz is less about this young woman, and to him it's a sign. So he's supposed to recognize this pregnancy, this woman who shouldn't be giving pregnant because she's too young, is giving pregnant, has gotten pregnant. She gives birth to a boy child, and she chooses the name Emmanuel and that's all part of the sign that he's to look for. And so when this birth happens, this starts the clock. He can begin to count the years until, as the prophecy says, the boy will know enough to refuse evil and choose good. And that actually has meaning in Hebrew culture at that time. At about age 10 to age 12, the boys were initiated into Judaism and became responsible as adults. And it was assumed at that time they knew enough to refuse evil and choose good. So Ahaz can say, okay, this woman, whoever she was, gave birth to this boy. She called him Emmanuel, and that starts the clock. So now I've got about 10 to 12 years, and these two kings will be gone by the end of that time. And so the prophecy actually continues on and says a few more things. It says, before that time, before the boy will know enough to refuse evil and choose good, the land of the enemy kings will be barren. They will be nothing. And so at that time, it says in the prophecy, the boy will eat curds and honey. And there's meaning to that. It doesn't actually literally, well, yeah, I'm sure literally he is eating curds and honey, but there's a deeper meaning to it. And the meaning is that they won't be confined to the city and food will be plentiful. And so what happened in battles and attacks in those times is the cities had walls around them, and the people who would come up to try to conquer a city would surround the city with their troops and basically starve the people inside out. And so the people inside would eat whatever food they had inside, and when they ran out of that food, things would become very desperate and they would start eating the dead people and doing all sorts of nasty things we don't need to talk about. And so this is saying at that time, you won't be confined in the city, food will be plentiful, everything will be wonderful, you have nothing to worry about, and the land of those enemy kings will be barren. So that's all the prophecy details for Ahaz, and this is a wonderful thing for Ahaz. It gives him something to look forward to and a promise from God that he can believe in. And so Isaiah doesn't explicitly say it's a virgin birth. I've said that over and over already. He says it's a young unmarried woman who would give birth, and that would be an unusual thing. That's definitely a thing that is Unusual, but not impossible. It definitely happened. There were many times when it happened, I'm sure. And so, as I said, it could happen in many ways. But no one, of course, was thinking virgin birth. That would be a crazy idea. No one would have thought that a woman would give birth to a son without ever having a father involved there somewhere. And so no one was thinking of that in those terms at that time. And so the word Alma is used in the Bible to indicate that that something odd is going on. If you look at it in the Hebrew language, you say, boy, this doesn't line up. It doesn't kind of make sense the way the sentence is written. And that's because it's being used here for two fulfillments of a prophecy. Two prophecies, or a single prophecy, is being fulfilled twice. And as I said before, the two parts of this prophecy do different things. One gives Ahaz encouragement and a sign to watch for. And when he sees that sign, he can start counting down and say, these guys are almost gone. And he knows when it's going to happen. So a wonderful thing for Ahaz. And for us, it's an unexpected sign of the coming Messiah. Unexpected because who would have expected this to mean this Alma virgin birth to be a virgin birth? And you wouldn't have expected that because no one would have expected that. And so this unexpected sign of the coming Messiah was to confirm who he was. And so this is not an uncommon thing in the Bible, these dual prophetic fulfillments. Lots of places that happens. And as I said before, there's also some places where triple fulfillments happen. And God loves to do that, and to him it makes lots of sense. To us, it might be a bit of a challenge to see how that's better, but it is, and it's not that uncommon to see those in the Bible.